Hi guys, Mickey here, Hampshire Outdoors and Survival. So this story is Mac's story. I'm putting it up for him. So several weeks ago we were discussing what we could do for videos, and I said let's do something a little bit different, something other than survival, something other than bushcraft, just something out of a bit of interest. Let's vary it up a little bit because we cover outdoors things. And I said to him, look, being that I spent so much time in the West Country, I've always heard stories of big cats. Let's have a look into that. And he looked a bit shamefaced at me and a bit sort of surprised and said, well, mate, he said, I've never told you, purely and simply because I didn't want anybody thinking I was a bit weird, but I've actually had a big cat experience myself. So this is his tale. This is what happened to him. This is his experience of a big cat in Hampshire, in England. Guys, please enjoy this. Hope you get a bit of pleasure out of it. And as always, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell for future videos. Let's get into it. It's Mickey. Mickey out. Welcome guys to Hampshire Outdoors and Survival. So, here's a little tale for you. Okay, I told this on the live stream last Sunday, and a couple of guides have asked me if I would just cover this story on its own. So, here we go. This tale is set in October 2003, and although I call it a tale, it's not a tale, it's a fact. The man involved in this I've known for the best part of 40 years, and we have both worked together a lot over these years and found ourselves in some life and death situations. I trust this man like a brother. I know he's got my back, and so if he says to me this is what he saw, I 100% believe him. So October 2003, he'd gone night fishing, and this guy he's a really keen carp angler. Mac enjoys his angling. He really gets a buzz out of it, and will spend weeks sat by a lake catching his carp. Not only does he get pleasure out of the carp fishing, but this guy grew up in the countryside. He grew up in Scotland. He grew up in a place called Crieff, and he's a country lad. And he learned to spend his time as a youngster watching the wildlife and tuning in with nature, which later on in his career made him a damn good soldier. So he'd gone fishing. He set up, and for those of you that don't fish, carp anglers in the UK use what is called a bivvy, an open fronted tent, and they will literally base themselves by the lake with everything they need for days and days and days, and sometimes weeks. Okay, and he'd been there for a day or so, absolutely reveling in the peace, the quiet. And the facility he was fishing at has a country park to the back of it, and a river to the front of it, and a lake complex in the centre, and this is all surrounded by a security fence. Okay, the angling there is by permit and club membership only, so it's very well secured. And he was fishing, minding his own, and in the evening a young lad turned up in the swim a few metres to his left, and set his gear up to fish his area. And in the UK, I don't know about the rest of the world, we have set swims, so you have a spot where you fish from, and that's your little section of the lake, and they can be anything from 4 to 5 to 20 to 35 metres apart. So again, I can't be exact on the distances apart, but the guy was to his left and close enough for Mac to be able to hear him set up, and he was only a young lad. So this young lad got set up, and Mac, like me, being an older guy, you have a little bit of a peek just to make sure he's not going to be a pain, and see this young lad getting his kit out, and thought, yeah, fair on you, you seem to know what you're doing. And the lad got set up. And the day drove into the afternoon, into the evening, and all was good. Absolutely peaceful. It was quiet on the lake. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, as Max laying there on his camp bed in his bivvy, he could hear a fish slapping and flapping and disturbing the water to his left. And he thought to himself, good on you, lad, you caught one. Okay. But this noise kept on and on and on for several minutes. And eventually Mac could hear of a chap running up the bank, and the guy, young lad, came to Mac's bivvy and said, mate, you awake, you awake? Max said, yeah, what's up? He said, I've snagged a fish, and I can't get it onto the bank to unhook it. Now, carp fishing in the UK is an expensive sport, and a lot of money is spent on the welfare of the fish. They're very well cared for, and they're very, very prized. Some of these fish can run 60, 70 pounds in weight. So Mac jumped up, went back with the young lad, and they got to the young lad's swim. And Mac had a look, and sure enough, several metres out, this fish has got its line caught in something in the water, can't get off the hook, can't be pulled in, it's stuck and it's flapping around in distress. And Mac's not a man to allow that. So he looked at the situation, and he knows the lake like the back of his hand. It's not something I would suggest to somebody who doesn't know the depth and the condition of the water, and bear in mind this is an October night. So Mac stripped to his boxer shorts, knew the depth of the water, knew the condition of the water, and went in. And he got to the fish and released the snag. And both him and the young man said, for the benefit of the fish, let's just release it straight back in. We won't take it out. And they released it. Max, he said, a wonderful feeling of allowing a fish to just slide out of your hands and swim gently away into the lake. He said, I was cold, bitterly cold. He said, although it was a bright and reasonably mild night for October, obviously the water temperature was down. And he said, I came out, got onto the bank and thought, right, I want some warmer clothes on. The clothes I've got here are okay, t-shirt, trousers and that, but I need to get myself warmed up. Just a bit of a think about it. It's just a lad, keep an eye on my gear. I'm going to go back to my car, warm myself up, dry myself off and get myself sorted out. So he decides to walk back to the car. And the walk back to the car is about 100 metres. A lovely path edging the lake all the way up. He's got the fence to his left, and just the other side of the fence is quite a fast-flowing local river. It's not a big river, but it's quite fast-flowing, quite shallow, and it's, as Max said, he said, all you could hear as I walked back was the sound of the river. It's quite loud. And he walked back, and he was feeling good. He was feeling quite happy with himself. He's helped the young lad out. All's good. He's safe. The fish is okay. It's a good night. All is good in Mac's world. Well, just before you get to the gate to get out to the car park, there's a small bridge, and this bridge is about 10 feet long. It's got room enough for one person to walk across it. So Mac's not thinking of anything that's going to worry him or disturb him. And as I said before, this is a countryman. This is a countryman and an ex-serviceman. He has been in some dark and scary places, and he's not easily fazed. I mean, I've spent weeks with this guy out in the field. We've been in some pretty scary places, and I've never known him fazed. And he said, I was walking across the bridge, and he said, and something just hit me a little bit. Atmospherics. He said something was just not quite right. He said, and as I come to the end of the bridge, this thing stepped out of the undergrowth on one side, and this is very dense undergrowth. He said it just stepped out. He said, and I stood there and I looked at this thing, and our eyes locked. It stopped and looked at me. He said, now, for another human being, you would probably panic. Some people say they'd scream. Some people say they'd run away. Max said, I just froze. I looked at it. He said, the thought that went through my head was, what the is that? He said, and as I locked eyes with it and stared at it, I realised what I'm looking at is a big cat. And not just your average large moggy. This is a big black cat. This cat is larger than an Alsatian. In appearance, it is very, very long, with a long tail. And as he said, 3 seconds isn't long. But when you're locked eye to eye with something like this for those 3 seconds, time just slows down. The adrenaline starts to pump through your body, and your body slows the time down. Okay? He said, and in that time, I was just able to gaze at it, and it looked away from me, and it moved off, across the path into the undergrowth the other side, and it slinked. He said, it's the only way I can describe the movement. It was slinky, it was fluid, it was effortless, it just moved away. No fear, no panic, no concern. It just went away. He said, well, I stood there for a second too, absolutely shocked. He said, well, this is the United Kingdom. You don't get things like this here. He said, and then he said, the fear hit me. The fear of, that is a big cat. That is a big fucking cat, right? That could that hurt me? Is it a threat? Is it a danger, right? The military mindset kicks in. Assess the situation. Where is the threat? What is the threat? Oh, by now he's shivering. He's wet. He's cold. Right? He knows he's got to get to his car, get himself sorted out, and his car is safety. His car is closer than the bivvy. Okay. The car is closer than the young lad. So if I get to the car, I'm safe. Which is what he does. Goes to the gate, shoots to his car. Okay? His car's sitting there in the car park. He unlocks the car, gets into the car, starts the car up, turns the heater on, turns the headlights on. And as he said to me, it sounds daft, he said, but I drove a lap of the car park with the high beam on, very, very slowly, trying to see this thing again, because now I'm breaking the fear down and I'm starting to think to myself, that was fantastic. What have I just seen? What the hell have I just seen? Where did it come from? Where's it gone? What is it? You know, it's a big cat, I know that, but I don't know a lot about big cats. And he drove round, and he came back and he parked up, and now part of his brain is saying to him, don't get out of the car, go home. The other part of his brain is saying to him, you've spent years building up all that fishing gear. There's thousands of pounds worth of fishing gear and bivvy and equipment on that bank. There's a young lad on that bank who doesn't even know that this is here. Could it be a threat to him? So Mac has a think about this, and again, he is a, how would I describe Mac? Strong individual, describe him. He's a man of courage and he's a man of strength. He's also quite a deep thinker, although he'd never admit that himself. And he faces this over every few minutes, and he gets his kit out the back of the car and gets himself into some warmer gear, gets himself dried up, has a quick look round inside the car. I've not brought a torch with me, all my lights are back at the bivvy. I'm not afraid of moving in the dark, that doesn't normally bother me. I've got nothing in the car here to use as a weapon or to protect myself. Okay, everything's back there, this is what I have to do. And he parks the car up by the gate after having a final lap, shining the lights around just to make sure that it's not sitting there waiting for him. He shuts the car down, gets out, locks the car, and as he said to me, the walk back to the young lad was probably one of the longest walks I've ever taken. He said, I don't want to rush, I don't want to blunder into something, I want to move quietly, stealthily, with purpose, back to the young man, which is what he did. He made his way back to the young man. Now, by the time he's got that there, he's thought, well, this thing's gone. If it's around here somewhere, it's not. I've never heard of it attacking people. People have not been attacked. I've not been attacked. So he's starting to de-escalate the threat in his mind, and he thinks to himself, well, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to sit with the young lad for a while, and if we don't see or hear anything, then obviously the threat has moved on. This thing could be miles away by now. And he goes back and he doesn't say anything to the young lad. He doesn't want to frighten him. He doesn't want to scare him unnecessarily. And more than that, he's now starting to think, who can I tell about this? What can I say? People are going to laugh at me. They're going to ridicule me. You're going, oh, you're crazy. You saw a big cat. How about the UFO? You started wearing tinfoil on your head. That sort of thing. So he thinks, well, I best just keep it to myself. And he gets back to the young man and he sits there for a couple of hours with him and they talk and enjoy the rest of the night. And eventually Mac gets to the point where the adrenaline's worn off and his body's crashing. And he knows, I'm going to get some sleep. I'm absolutely exhausted. It's been a hell of a night. I'm going to go crash out. And he says his good nights to the young man, walks back to his bivvy, gets into his bivvy. And he said to me, he said, silliest thing in the world. He said, I looked round the bivvy. The only thing I could find that was a possible weapon was the mallet that I used to drive the pegs in to secure the bivvy. He said, so I picked that up, got into my bivvy, zipped up the front and went to sleep. And he said, and I woke up several hours later. And then my initial thought was, it was a dream. Until I realised I'm still holding the mallet in my hand. Well, he carried on fishing throughout the day and finished his session, packed his kit up, said his goodbyes to the young lad, and went home, and thought nothing more of it. He put it to the back of his mind. He said, well, who can I tell? Again, I don't want to be ridiculed. Don't want people laughing at me. Don't want people sniggering behind my back. Just keep it to myself. It's not a big deal. I'm just going to change page. It's not a big deal. We'll leave it at that. And several weeks go by, and he decides I'm going to go up there for another session. I'll take a decent head torch with me this time. And I'm probably going to keep a stick nearby. Okay. And he goes back. And he goes into the tackle shop near the venue, and he's in the queue waiting to be served, when the lady at the counter says to a guy in front of him, or several people in front of him, says, have you seen that big cat of yours lately then? And Mac thinks, hello? Now he knows there are people in the tackle shop, guys that are going to be fishing on that complex, because that's what it's there to serve. And his brain's like, what the hell? So he drops out of the queue and he waits for the guy to come away. And he sort of stops him and he says, look, mate, I don't want to be rude. I'm not taking the mickey out of you or anything. Genuinely, have you seen a big cat here? And the guy says, yes, I fish here weekly. And on 2 occasions, I've seen the cat. And Max said, you're joking. He said, tell me more. And it turns out the first occasion, it was several metres away. The guy heard a disturbance in the undergrowth. And bear in mind, there's a country park very close by. Here's a disturbance in the undergrowth. 2 deer come belting out the undergrowth. And then just a few seconds behind that came the big cat. And it was obviously a deer. And the guy said, no, it's definitely a cat. 100% sure it was a cat. I'm positive it was a big black cat, the size of a large dog, and it was going for it. He said, and I just sat there and went, and this thing disappeared. And a guy, big carp anglers, strange old bunch, just carried on fishing and went, the hell is that? On another occasion, he was sat in his bivvy when he heard something behind him. He looked over the bivvy and spotted, about 25-30 metres away in the undergrowth, the cat. Okay, wasn't looking at him, wasn't stalking him. He just saw the cat as it was moving away. So that's 2 occasions another person has seen it. And so Mac told him his story. He said, this is what happens to me. And the guy went, well, yeah, but this area is famous for it. And Mac, he's from Scotland, he's not aware of this. The guy said, this area is famous for it. This is Yateley in West Hampshire, and there have been big cat sightings round here for donkey's years. People regularly see them crossing local roads and all the rest of it. And Mac, at that point, sort of went, right, well, thank you very much, mate, appreciate that, and got the rest of his gear and went off fishing for the day. Now people say to me, well, why would you then go off fishing knowing that that's there? Well, as Mac said, I've done a little bit of research. In the intervening 2 weeks, it had gone through his mind, and he'd looked it up on the internet, and he'd looked it up, and he'd seen, yes, big cats are spotted all over the UK all the time. Very rarely are anybody attacked. He looked into the species, and he even took a day trip to Marwell Zoo with his granddaughter, with his daughter, and had a look at the big cats down there. And in so doing, was able to positively identify what he had seen. Okay. Now, does that make him afraid to fish up there? Well, as he said to me, occasionally in the early hours of the morning, when there's a noise behind you in the undergrowth, your brain goes on alert. The hairs can stand up. He said, but being a good country lad, most of the time you'll recognise the sound and go, it's a blackbird in the undergrowth. It's a fox moving. The sound of the step. You learn to recognise them. So he still fishes there. He still enjoys his peace and quiet up there. He knows the big cats are there. I don't hold too much of a fear for him. As he says, I don't really want to tussle with it, but if it leaves me alone, I'll leave it alone. And that's Mac's story. The story of his experience of a big cat, 2003, in Yateley, in Hampshire, in England. This has been Mick, Hampshire Outdoors and Survival. I hope you enjoyed this story. Hope you get some pleasure from it. Please, don't be afraid. Don't let it stop you going out into the countryside and enjoying it. Okay? And, yeah, peace and light be upon you all. This is Mickey out.